Welcome back to Reformed Millennials, the podcast where finances, economic trends, and sports intersect. Cam and Joel help listeners better invest their time and money. Also, it's important for listeners to understand that investing in equities, fixed income instruments, and/or alternative asset classes involves substantial risk of loss. Any action you may take as a result of the information presented in this podcast is your own responsibility. The information in this podcast is presented as a general educational, informational, and entertainment resource only. While Joel is registered to provide investment advice, this podcast does not provide individualized investment, tax, or insurance advice, nor is it meant as a recommendation to any listener to buy or sell any specific securities or otherwise take any other form of investment action. This is an excerpt of the full legal disclaimer that's available on the landing page of this podcast, which includes whether Cam Pitchers or Joel Shackleton have any ownership or interest in the specific securities discussed in this podcast.
All right, Joel, what do you think about the prospect of getting another generational basketball talent that does not want to be in our country
at all
by the end of this week?
I feel like Damian Lillard would be a different person than Kawhi Leonard in that he wouldn't share the ball as well. He would
be the most disgruntled. He would be vocally disgruntled about being where he is.
Yeah.
Whereas Kawhi
kind of would shut up and play.
Well, he's just known as being, and he had no leverage from the standpoint that he had been, like, people probably don't remember this, especially if you're not a basketball fan, but he had just come off of a horrific injury, had played 9 games the prior year, and the whole reason why he got traded was because how he felt he was mismanaged from the injury standpoint and why he got traded. So did he want to go to Toronto? No, but at the same time, I think what ended up happening, obviously, is that everyone else was lowballing to get the player, and Toronto had the best package and said, yeah, we'll do it, and they just banked 100% on him wanting to prove himself and say that was, I'm assuming that was probably the market. Okay, you're here for a year, maximum if you want to be. Let's make the most out of it. You want to make money, you want to get back up to max value, as they say in the NBA contract lingo, and you have the opportunity to do it with a really, really good supporting cast. And he's not someone who is a media darling, going to be out there on social media or in, traditional media talking about it. Whereas now you have a player who has literally had the most public, outside of maybe James Harden and a couple others in the NBA who have the Kevin Durant kind of thing, like vocally said where they want to go and what they want to do. No one's really forced themselves out like Lillard has in the past, or at least created the narrative to say, I'm only going to go to one place, and if you don't trade me there, then I'm not going to be happy or I'm not going to perform. And obviously the NBA's had a lot of pushback on that, and they're, I think, just working with the PA to design some rules around what you can and cannot share from that standpoint, because obviously it's not good for the game for the players to have that much power to say, well, I'm just going to sit here, but my contract's guaranteed, but I can't. There's no way to, I guess, renege on that contract if I'm at least showing up and staying on the bench. So he's, as of right now, I think all the experts are talking about, in realistic terms, he's either going to show up to Portland and play it out and just be, again, does Portland want that? They want a disgruntled player, etc., or he's going to be in Miami. Now, as of yesterday, you shared with me, I think it was pretty viral news yesterday about Toronto becoming the front runner and from a package standpoint, I guess I'm going to defer to the experts, obviously, in terms of what they can offer and how valuable that might be. The NBA draft picks and compensation structures are very complicated, and in order to come up with a great package, you can basically go out like something like 10 years with draft picks, essentially, to give firsts and swaps and all this other stuff. So apparently Toronto has what they would need in order to do it. They have enough talent and salary to match with Dame to get him here. And on paper, and I was talking with a guy from work yesterday who's a huge NBA nerd, and he was basically laying out, he's like, that actually might be a better like 1-2 punch, like having Dame Lillard and Pascal Siakam, for example. And what the NBA is built on, duos or trios. for the most part, right?
Yep.
So if you have, we talked about this in sports in general and how NBA is, kind of the most predictable sport in terms of if you have great talent, then like I guess I'm coming at it from like the sports betting perspective now. It's like if you have great talent who is playing most games who are who are a good match, then it's pretty predictable kind of 60 to 70% of the time, whatever the predicted outcome is going to be, it is what's going to happen. Whereas there's not as much luck involved when you have that much talent on the floor, and talent that works decently hard is going to trump people who work hard with no talent every day of the week. And in basketball, that can be that can leapfrog you above a bunch of teams pretty quickly. So you're looking at a Toronto team who would be, very mid, to use a very current term, a mid team, and this would springboard them into relevancy and probably into the top 4 in their conference on paper, at least in terms of the match between some of the players they would have offensively. And so you can see why Toronto wants to do it. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, you got people that are fighting for their jobs. I mean, they're coming off that high of the NBA championship pre-pandemic, and it's like everyone's obviously the golden boys at that time, but they've moved on from their coach that won. Masai Ujiri, who's a pretty visible face in this country in terms of his sports success as well as what he's done kind of humanitarian-wise, etc. But even he's obviously under the gun. It's like we were successful. We were in the playoffs for a lot of years. Now we've had a couple down years, three down years in a row. And that's just the ebbs and flow of sport. Like one day, it's not what you did for me today or what you did for me yesterday. It's what you're going to do for me tomorrow. And you're going to be judged whether or not you can be successful and continue to drive the business. And this is one way in the NBA. The only way to really increase relevancy, increase your business is by acquiring talent. And Toronto, unfortunately, has had a really hard time doing that outside of drafting and developing. So whenever these kind of disgruntled players come up, Toronto always goes to the top of the list because they're like, screw it, we'll roll the dice. We'll see if we can. He's gone in contract for 2 more years. So maybe they can get this guy. I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's smoke and mirrors. I think it's probably a ploy potentially by the agent in this case to try and force Miami's hand to up their offer to get Portland to say yes and eventually move him where he wants to go, which is kind of an old school trick in terms of just creating the market that you want. But at the same time, if Toronto were to be able to pull this off, and again, low key rumors if you follow the NBA is that. I mentioned the name earlier, Masai Ujiri, who's the president, basically kind of runs the team. He's from Africa, has a huge footprint in NBA Africa and the development there, and has a great relationship with a former MVP by the name of Giannis. I'm not going to...
Could you imagine?
And I know that's his plan. So he's off in 2 years, essentially. Yeah. You get Dame Lillard there on contract and say, hey, Giannis, what do you think about matching up with these 2 guys and creating a new big 3 in the East? I don't know. I love it. So I'm on that rumor train all day. Love it. And pie in the sky idea. The realistic side of me says this is not going to happen, and this is a pipe dream. And again, Toronto is being used as a leverage piece to try and force the hand of Miami to really get what the player wants. And this really comes back to that conversation we talked about a few months ago, probably, just in terms of like where the power lies in all the 4 big sports in terms of players versus owners.
It lies in tax rates and beaches.
It does, especially when you have we talk about free agency and like the power that's there now. Like that's always been there for players in general. I mean, the free agency is not a new concept, but the way that the decision-making has changed so much in the past, I'd say 5 to 10 years. In the NHL, we can see it. They're attracting, like you said, low tax. So Florida, Texas, Tennessee, etc. Vegas. They're Nevada, yeah. So all these zero-state tax jurisdictions that are able to say, well, we can pay you less money gross. You take more home net. You get to live in the sun.
Where's the downside?
The argument's not really easy. So same thing with Dame here. He wants to go to Miami. I'm assuming like Florida good tax, good team. I mean, that's a good benefit too. Obviously, I think you do. That's definitely. We're not going to say that every player is just looking for the most money. Sometimes, especially when you're talking about NBA players who are.
Well, yeah, and everybody else wants to go there
$45
too. So at least you're always going to have a big 2, big 3
exactly.
to play with.
And so all this power shifting to the. I mean, it has to give the owners some pause. Unless you're in those markets, of course.
Didn't the Milwaukee Bucks just sell?
Recently, not like just this year, I don't believe.
Anyway, and I mean, there's some big risk in small market with large superstar talent with upcoming contracts. There's a lot of risk there. Now, owning
well, especially when you can literally say, I'm out. Like, that does not happen in any other sport. Like, NBA is like, I don't want to play here. It's like, but you have a contract to play here. And he's, nah.
That's nice.
Yeah.
I signed it. I mean,
I'll sit on the bench. It's all good. I've also just made $100 million net over the last 5 years. So if I have to sit at home and not get paid for a bit, that's cool. But I'm assuming you don't want this distraction, and you don't want a bad asset on your books, because my value is only going to deteriorate in terms of a trade package the longer you wait on this. So holding, obviously, like if you're a bench player, you don't have the same power. But at the elite levels of sport, there's really no power struggle like there is right now in the NBA. And that's probably, we talked previously about all of the strides that sport has made and how much of an international impact they have now. This is one thing I think that is definitely bugging them, especially when you talk about, call it 1/3 of the league is made up of these preferential locations and big market teams. The rest are struggling for relevancy, and they want it to be a fair playing field.
Yeah, Toronto needs some global warming real quick.
They need to turn on the beach and the lake needs to really improve itself.
Yeah. Not that it's not nice; it's just not comparable to Florida. With all that said, there's a lot of sporting news that has kind of gone on here. I'm not going to talk about Verstappen's win because I'm pretty sick of F1.
It's
I'm
honestly
much more interested.
I'll be on record in saying this is probably the worst outcome of a year for the sport that it could have had, given all of its hype that went into the year.
Isn't he a great teammate too? Just Verstappen's a great guy.
He's a killer. I'm like, he's like MJ. Yeah. He's not like, you don't need to be liked. You don't need to be. He's a talent level is crazy. It's evident. Last week, I think I was chatting with you. He beat everybody by half a second during qualifying. Beat his teammate by like 3/4 of a second. Obviously, same setup, all this stuff. The talent is undeniable. They're falling into the same trap that they've had previous to this, when like Lewis was winning all of his. The team is so far and above everybody else, the Red Bull team right now, and it is incredible that there can be that big of a discrepancy when you mix talent and the better car, because you can see that directly, that it's the mix of the two things. Now, like, I love dominance. Like I've told you before, like I thought I got into the NBA like really heavily when it was Cavs and Warrior. You knew those two teams were going to be in the finals for the next 4 years or whatever it was. I loved it. It was great intrigue, even though as a casual fan or whatever at that time, you knew what the end outcome was going to be in terms of the final two teams, more or less, or like at least that was like the betting favorite. And it was like, really, if you were just to tune in every year during playoffs or at the finals, you'd be like, really, it's the same two teams every single year? That seems crazy. Is that good for the sport? And I would say at that point it was, because it created this like dynasty talk. We're in like an individual sport where in F1 anyways, I feel like a lot of what the intrigue was over the past 3-4 years was, some of it was because of parity. There was an actual fight for the championship. But the other thing is that people have come to realize that, like, if I really love X driver on X team, and they were kind of at least competitive with the rest of the field. There's no, like, you're fighting for second, you're fighting for third. And I know as a F1 fan from yesteryear that's kind of always been the case. Like, you have to cheer for not first place, you cheer for what your team can achieve, which might be 5th place or 4th place, and that would be an amazing result. But in terms of what North American sports is based off of, it's you're either first or you're last. And when you see the same guy winning every single week, which is, again, it's amazing to see dominance, but I think in this specific case, it's not working.
It's non-competitive dominance. Like there's no one even close, which is not
like he
fun.
needs to have a mechanical failure for there to be an issue.
Yeah,
crazy.
And I'm pulling for it every week. Let's move into markets here. We've had a pretty severe sell-off. And
it hasn't looked great.
No. For anybody looking at their portfolio of recent, unless you're in gold or commodities, you're likely getting your butt spanked. And that's, not to be assumed. This is what we kind of expected. We've been talking about for the last 6 weeks, is the fact that the hot portion of the government cycle has come to an end. The choppiness begins.
Yep.
Positioning with policy has started. The unfortunate reality is that inflation has been very sticky. Employment has stayed full. And we have what seems to be no end in sight with regards to the confidence of the consumer and the deterioration of what is required to see interest rates come down. And we're now pricing in equities over a longer period of time at a higher interest rate, which means your discounted cash flows need to be priced differently, which then tells you that equities need to come down in a price to earnings multiple. We're now sitting on an S&P 500 trailing PE that is right around the historical norm, which makes a lot of sense given the fact that we're at what looks like long-term 4 to 5% Fed funds rate. So that's all to be said that if you aren't in a diversified portfolio that owns commodities and owns different portions of an asset allocation, which for most people over the last 15 years has not included commodities. It's almost been always exclusively been a 60-40, 40% bonds, 60% equities. You're getting hammered now. The Dow Jones is up a whopping, I think, 2-ish% this year. At one point, the NASDAQ was up nearly 30 some odd percent. So the S&P sitting around 12, the TSX barely hovering around 5. It's been a tough 2 months, and it's been expected given the stickiness of inflation and the verbiage coming from our Bank of Canada, the Fed. And when you then start to extrapolate that into Europe, Europe is inarguably in a recession right now. They have the inability to continue to cut rates while inflation is still rampant. I'm much more concerned about that portion of the globe than I am about North America, relatively. But that doesn't change the fact that we need to be paying attention to two things, and that's back to what it was a year ago, and that was the VIX and the US dollar. So long as inflation and employment stays high or tight, we need to pay attention to those two things so that we can continue to allocate our portfolios appropriately. So what does that mean? In my opinion, I think a few things are going to start to contribute to a
I was going to say, actually just start up our podcast from 9 months ago. And
yeah, it's what it feels like, right?
Ago.
And I don't anticipate that we're going to see the same sort of sell-off like we did in 2022. We're coming from much lower multiple. Not only that, inflation is insanely low, especially in Canada. When you then apply it relatively to the rest of the world, we actually have our interest rates are above where inflation is. That is a strong position to be in. The same thing in the United States. So relatively, we look good. If you want to be invested somewhere that's going to show lower volatility, you're going to want to be in North America. But what you're going to see is the price of equities have to come down, and the yields or the dividend payouts on those securities are going to go up because the price is down. So you're going to see a 7-8% yield on Enbridge. You're going to see a 6-5 to 7% yield on your banks. That's where the market is expecting equity prices to go, so that it can give investors a reason to not be lending their money to the government. Like if you can get a free risk-free rate by lending to the United States government or the Canadian government at 5 on a short duration bond, why would you give it to JP Morgan or to the CIBC or BMO if they're not yielding above that? You need to see those yields be higher, so equities are going to therefore sell off a bit. So that's where we're at right now. If you've been listening to this podcast for the last 6 months, you likely would have owned commodities going into this. Gold has dramatically outperformed bonds over the last 3 months to the tune of 8%. It's been a pretty great run. And that's just staying flat. I think moving forward, the way in which your asset allocation sits is going to be a little bit more diversified. I think more asset managers are going to do that. Institutions are repositioning. Alternatives are becoming more popular. And when you start to then look at the top 7, big 7 companies, without a sell-off there, these just don't look that attractive. So
I was going to say, on the commodity front, I've now seen, I believe, commercials. Is it for the World Gold Council? Have you seen that?
Well, like, if anyone watches BNN, there's always been a gold selling. Or,
has there? Okay, because I seen it on. It must have been on like Sportsnet.
Well, nobody's advertising on global when you got gold ETFs being sold there. But I kind of want to pivot to the big 7 and talk a little bit about Amazon. It's made some serious waves the last couple days. Earlier this morning, Lena Khan brought forward an FTC suit with regards to their anti-competitive marketplace.
Yeah, Google's tossing in injunctions or whatever you call them, left, right, and center.
Yeah, I don't know the legal speak here, so excuse me.
Injunction sounds pretty good.
Yeah. So the FTC is suing Amazon, and I mean, I'm going to read a really important passage from we'll call it the complaint. Mm-hmm. The case is about the illegal course of exclusionary conduct Amazon deploys to block competition, stunt rivals' growth, and cement its dominance. The elements of this strategy are mutually reinforcing. Amazon uses a set of anti-discounting tactics to prevent rivals from growing by offering lower prices. And it uses coercive tactics involving its order fulfillment service to prevent rivals from gaining the scale they need to meaningfully compete. Amazon deploys the interconnected strategy to block off every major avenue of competition, including price, product selection, quality, and innovation in the relevant markets for online superstores and online marketplace services. So it's hard to not view that as being an issue, but the pushback will likely be that Amazon also has integrated all of its own products. So they have a loyalty program of Prime so that you can benefit from the lowering of prices, free delivery. They have bundling under that same name of Prime, but then also having Amazon Basics where they sell additional product. I don't believe, and Lena Khan has now a $1 billion record, as she just recently went up against Microsoft with Activision and then Facebook earlier this year and lost. I don't see her winning this one either. She continues to take the approach of, this one I believe is stronger than the last two, but she's missing the big one here, and it's always been the Apple App Store and the Google App Store. And I just can't see how she's going to end up winning this one as a consumer who uses Amazon a lot. I don't view it as being something that has made my life worse. If anything, I view it as having a more competitive pricing, or it gives me more visibility into competitive pricing. I do recognize that Amazon doesn't have the best prices, but I also have the ability to go to Walmart or to Best Buy or to any number of online websites to buy these goods. So unless you're completely incompetent and don't know how to shop.
I feel like that's one thing though that's like it's what's been like built into the fabric of our lives a little bit, and like the pandemic didn't necessarily help this at all, considering we were doing or even people who did not previously use online platforms to purchase things, they obviously a huge influx of that there. But the fact that, like you just talked about, if I'm not incompetent about shopping around or doing more than 30 seconds of research into something, or research is the wrong word, but just shopping around for something to make sure that I am not spending more than I should be on something, like that's incumbent on us as a consumer, right? And it's like you're passing this buck off to say, well, Amazon's just so visible, it makes it so easy, and it's on your phone, it's on your computer, it's the convenience of it trumps everything else, and because they've built this amazingly easy to use platform and service, then they should be punished for it. Like I have a hard time there's probably certain aspects of this, especially in the details. I know you just read an excerpt of it, and like, I agree with you. I think there is probably some really strong conversation around it. But if I'm just being objective and thinking about it too, I think what they've done is a great thing, but it's still it's incumbent on the person using the service to realize whether or not am I paying the best price? Am I extending myself beyond my means? Am I getting the right deal, I guess? And I don't see it going in a positive direction in terms of an outcome in that case. But
yeah, so
I digress. It's just really hard for that to be completely argued in her favor, I would say.
Yeah, and where I believe there to be a anti-competitive argument here is actually from the seller's point of view.
Yeah.
And their inclusion in the Amazon Prime store and for delivery. And there's an additional excerpt from the Wall Street Journal article that I'm reading that I think is quite damning and sounds terrible on its face. And I'm going to read a portion of it now. One set of tactics stifles the ability of rivals to attract shoppers by offering lower prices. Amazon deploys a sophisticated surveillance network of web crawlers that constantly monitor the internet, searching for discounts that might threaten Amazon's empire. When Amazon detects elsewhere online a product that is cheaper than a seller's offer for the same product on Amazon, Amazon punishes that seller. It does so to prevent the rivals from gaining business by offering shoppers or sellers lower prices. So that sounds terrible. Mm-hmm. Whether or not that's true, I don't know. However, I could see that as being something they could do and would do. So there are, in my opinion, some valid arguments here to push up against my Amazon bias. And it's my guess, and I don't know anything here, that there will be areas in which she can win, Lena Khan, that is, the FTC head. And there's going to be changes, probably some fines that Amazon are going to owe against. But in my opinion, it's not going to be because of the anti-competitive nature in which it doesn't improve the outcome for consumers. I think it's actually more so from the anti-competitive nature of how they treat their competition on the selling front. So,
and their vendors.
100%. And sadly, they built an infrastructure at Amazon, which just speaks to their, I think, moat, that if you aren't selling on Amazon, you're not likely going to have a business, and that if you can't scale to the size of Best Buy or Costco, you're unlikely to be able to compete. And that is anti-competitive. But you can make that argument across almost all lines of business when you start to look at the advertising business versus YouTube and Facebook, when you start to look at even the grocery business when in its comparable to Kroger, or in our country, Save On Foods empire. It's hard for me to not just kind of throw other examples out there. Mm-hmm. In Canada, we're fighting about grocery stores and how somehow their 3 to 5% margins that they make on their food is the reason for why people can't afford food in this country. Whereas in the United States, this seems to be a sticking point for Lena Khan. And she wrote something, I believe, in 2017 where she was specifically identifying Amazon as being her target. So I've long been a believer that Amazon is, of the big seven, the most likely to be around my entire lifetime, for the rest of my life. And I think that is likely to continue. And the reason for that is because of their moat. And Lena Khan is directly attacking that right now. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. In other Amazon news, they also bought Anthropic, or didn't buy, but invested $4 billion in Anthropic, making them it makes Amazon's AWS their primary cloud provider and infrastructure provider for a leading ChatGPT or OpenAI competitor. Google has their own with Bard. Microsoft made this a very similar investment with OpenAI and ChatGPT, and Amazon did the exact same thing with the AI lab Anthropic. The people that founded Anthropic are direct descendants from Google's AI lab and OpenAI's. So they are, and in my opinion, fairly competitive and creating something very similar. And it's interesting to see which companies have decided that they require this sort of functionality. And in my opinion, as someone who's currently outfitting their new house with a smart home and with security and all those sorts of things, I'm even more excited with what Amazon's going to be able to produce, because I'm an Alexa person. I'm not the Apple Home is awful. The Google one apparently is pretty good.
It is, yeah. I was just say, like, Siri sucks. You hear that, Siri?
She's definitely listening, but it's okay if Apple listens.
Okay. Yeah.
No, I'm optimistic because for the last 10 years, it's almost, as an Amazon investor, you would assume they've been burning money on their AI and Alexa investment. When you look at their voice portion of their balance sheet, you're just like, what is that black hole? They're spending billions of dollars on this voice activation, artificial intelligence. To better serve you at the home. In my opinion, it is the number one untapped place in our lifestyle, or currently. When you think about where the phone doesn't have any dominance, it's in our home. It's the only place where you will openly talk at something and not feel stupid. It's a place where I don't believe the phone will dominate. When I'm at my house, I'm not on my phone as much as I might be on another device, whether it be a television, my computer, iPad, whatever. The infrastructure and the platform that you have at your home is open for competition, whereas the cell phone platform is owned. It's done. It is over. And I believe that Amazon likely is going to win here. When you look at Ring and then its integration into the rest, even right now I'm buying a Lorex system for my house because I live closer to downtown and the homelessness problem in Edmonton is prevalent. I require cameras. It integrates incredibly well into the Amazon Alexa system. Their open platform is incredible. And when you go to look at the apps that they have, it's shocking. They have like hundreds of thousands of apps, which just tells you that they've decided that they're going to be the platform for the home. And that's an interesting open opportunity. It feels like a call option on where the rest of a lot of GDP is going to be built, in my opinion.
And it's interesting that the integration between what you do have in your phone, I think, like, this is anecdotal, but I would say that there's not necessarily the same kind of brand stickiness with that. Like, I'm stuck with Apple. Like, I'm committed to it with my phone, but I have Google Home and I'm willing to try other things or use whatever's best to integrate with all of those things that you just talked about. So it's not like you are waiting. It's like, I'm only going to get the Apple stuff because that way it's whatever integration or efficiency there might be in getting it with my phone. I don't think I'm thinking about that. I'm not sure about you, but
even from a trust perspective, Facebook tried to build their in-home system with that whatever, we'll call it a calling. They had a piece of hardware where they tried to put it in your house. People don't trust Facebook at all. They'll spend their entire day on Instagram and Facebook, but they don't trust it. I think that the only brand trusted as much as Apple would be Amazon. People adore Amazon. It's done nothing but make their life more simple. Shopping is better. The experience is fantastic. Same-day delivery is insane. In my opinion, they're likely going to be, or they are leading the way into the home faster than anybody else. And they probably have such a large head start here that it's trivial for everybody else. I think Apple might make some great, compelling hardware that will fit into the home, but I would be more interested, given that I make most of my orders through Amazon, to have the Alexa set up. And that's actually the commitment I've made. And we're doing a renovation. I'm gonna smart home through the Alexa suite. And when I go on YouTube, I watch all the videos on how to set it up. It seems like it's the most
half of it
system.
will work at the end of the day.
yeah, exactly. But I mean, it's also affordable hardware. Where if you think about attaching an Alexa versus attaching an Apple Home to your house, it's 3 times more expensive to go the Apple route, and this stuff is likely not going to work. So you need to. It's hard to spend that much money and then have it not work for you. And I find that talking to Siri is the worst experience.
It's honestly crazy. And I was going to say, it's earlier just about you talking about the investment that Amazon's making. And sorry, what was the name of the...
Alexa.
No, the company they acquired, sorry, Anthropic. I think it's been largely communicated, the narrative, obviously, and the hype around AI and what that means for the consumer in terms of using an AI, calendar add-on or a ChatGPT or search engine or whatever it might be. The other thing that's really interesting is obviously they're making these investments into improving their internal processes within these companies and to improve the product that's then coming to consumers as well. Not necessarily it's not going to be marketed as an AI product per se, but the development of that product will have AI features in terms of the investment that they've made into their companies. So I kind of think of it as internal business development of their current system and how AI can improve that, not necessarily just giving an AI product to the end consumer. So because that's the thing that you don't hear about. It's like, okay, well, we're taking on this piece and this is what we've now created, this app that's going to be an Amazon app that's AI generated to use it. No, it's about how is the AI going to improve the existing things that are already there, which is also, I'm assuming, probably the driving factor.
No, completely. And you know what? And this is kind of driven by what you just mentioned. The fact that they're trying to break up these big 7 tech companies, it feels as though they're the only ones making meaningful investment in tech future. And in the past, that used to be the government.
Yeah.
And now the government is more so focused on funding war efforts and social programs, which likely is where it should be focusing, and letting the businesses take those big risks. But without scale and size, it's very difficult to make a 10-year, $15 billion investment into anything if you don't have the type of profit margins that these big businesses have. So who's going to do it if they don't? So I feel I'm torn. As someone who believes wholeheartedly that Apple's App Store needs to be spun out and be its own business, I also find it challenging to see how we continue to progress forward and see the type of technological advancements to solve our climate problem, climate crisis, to solve a whole host of social issues, all of these things that need to be done. Because in my estimation, we are not going to go in reverse from a consumption perspective. I don't believe that we're going to somehow magically solve climate by consuming less. If we don't innovate from a carbon reduction extraction perspective, we're likely going to melt the earth. I think that at some point we have to have this argument.
It's going to be on the backs of these titans at the end of the day.
Completely. And they're so well managed that they've broken all laws of investing. And the only way in which they don't continue to dominate is through anti-competitive policy. Mm-hmm. So,
which I think that's again from a narrative standpoint, it's really easy to have this as a huge conflict piece. That's like, you can't do this, you can't do this. Okay, maybe they can't, but let's also talk about what they can do, and let's work together. Mm-hmm. not to sound too soft here, but just at the end of the day, there's a lot of negative in the discussion around government versus these tech titans or versus these massive companies and anti-competitiveness, etc. But all the things that you just talked about, we're fighting all of these other issues that are affecting our globe, our country, etc. There should also be some olive branch action going on, saying, okay, we need to work together here on some things. We need to negotiate, and working together, I think, will have a lot more of a net benefit than trying to drive them away at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And drive away the innovation because there's been some negative things that have come from them becoming what they are. But if we can work with them on obviously trying to improve whatever that might be for small business and for consumers, then I'm all for that. But you can't just stop it there. You have to say, and if you do this, or if we can work together on this, then let's give you this opportunity to continue to innovate and help us in this manner where you can continue to profit and, diversify your business as well.
Yeah, 100%. So Alberta eyes more than half of CPP's assets and report on provincial plan. So what I want to stay away from here is the politics behind all of this. And I kind of want to just talk a little bit about the facts
The numbers, yeah.
and whether or not this is a good idea. Like, I don't want to talk about the politics of it because I don't even care about it. It feels like a leverage play, but who cares? Let's just, you and I being contributors to the CPP plan, employees, everyone listening to this is likely someone who benefits from it. If you're not in Canada, you don't. Even if you aren't but are a Canadian citizen, this matters to you. At first glance, do you think that this is a good idea? At some point, just from the 30,000-foot view of this, we as Albertans need to stop making enemies of the rest of the country. If we ever want to get anything done, when are we going to start being nice? I understand that a lot of the time it feels like the only way you get something done is if you're a hard-nosed person and you fight and claw for what you need and you deserve. But when it comes to at least our country, it feels like it's never actually worked. We've had a conservative government for a number of years now, and it feels as though, to me, we're not any further ahead with pushing through pipelines and things that benefit the Albertan way of life because we've been hard-nosed and because we've been sticking our middle finger up to the rest of the country.
Which, I think a lot of that is based on the fact that you are a conservative government of, is it 1, 2, 3 or 4 across the province versus, you're in the minority from a federal standpoint. And who would have the gavel when it comes to approving some of the things that would be policy-wise that would be required in order to meet your goals provincially. You don't have the ultimate power, which is, I guess, totally from your standpoint. Again, I'm not going to get into an opinion on either side, but the way this plays is that this is easy to talk about, something that voters and citizens of Alberta and the country, et cetera, will understand in terms of CPP. I know that. I know that
I'm going to get that.
Yeah, and I contribute to that, and I understand, it's also something that some people are like, why do I have to, can I opt out of this? And it's like, no, you cannot, unless you meet, very specific things where you don't have to contribute to it. But it feels like a easy thing to bring up in the media and to, again, create a narrative around, to then use as, if they can get enough support for it or can create enough of a leverage piece with it, then they can use it to get something that they actually want. So the old bait and switch. And because it's I think at the end of the day, the original narrative around, or the way that they were approaching, I guess, having an argument with the rest of the country for the past however many years has not worked. So let's find something else that we can discuss on. And that's what it feels like to me. But I think, I'm not sure where this, did you pick out this article?
Yeah, this is from the Globe and Mail.
Is it from the Globe? It's a great article, and it's unbiased, like you said. It just lays out facts.
100%. I really like Trevor Tombe. I think he does a really good job trying to straddle the line of bias, whether it be politically or even just different views on different things. He's a really smart guy. I believe he's a professor of economics at the U of C. I could be wrong about that. But CPP was started in 1966. Who would have thought the boomers would create something for themselves when they retire? So the maximum annual pension as of 2021 at age of 65 is $14,110 per year. The average person gets around $7,437. The government fund, or the CPP, is totaling around $500 billion. It's pretty darn big. I think what's important for us to understand and to look at is, first and foremost, a lot of people I work with always assume that, especially young people, millennials, wrongfully assume that we're not going to have a pension plan by the time that they become 65 years old. And I want to draw their attention to the performance of our CPP pension plan over the last, call it, 15 years. It has compounded at 10+% over that period.
Yeah, pretty good.
That is incredibly good. It's way better than the TSX. Way, way better. The S&P 600 has compounded just over 5.5. They are great asset managers. They've outperformed AIMCO. So to do it because of performance would be in my opinion, poor decision if you're looking back at past performance. Mm-hmm. In my opinion, that combined with the fact that if you are someone who views themselves as a Canadian, not an Albertan, mm-hmm. and maybe perhaps doesn't want to retire in Alberta, mm-hmm. or isn't going to work their entire lives in Alberta, mm-hmm. and maybe they earn income in Ontario or BC or Saskatchewan or New Brunswick, you view this as being a nice diversified place to be contributing money to for your retirement in the future. If we somehow figure out a way to pull the Alberta portion out, that then further constricts us as Albertans. And it then increases the bureaucracy that will be then included into the management of multiple pensions that you will then be contributing to because you diversify where you work.
Yeah. Not to mention the fact that you're taking not that the AIMCO, I think that's who that's obviously proposed would be the asset managers and allocators here, but
and they're very good, by the way.
Yeah, nothing against. I'm just saying that you're putting, again, maybe I'm not sure what AIMCO's outlook would be if it'd be the same as what the current asset managers would be from the CPP standpoint, but like you are changing that outlook, whether it be focused on regionally versus nationally. I think that would also be something to consider. And I think one of the biggest talking points out of this news article or this news story is about how we have higher total contributions in Alberta. And it's like, yes, we do, because relative to our population, like we have a higher percentage of working age population and a higher participation rate who make higher wages than the Canadian average. So then, yes, our CPP contributions.
But our draw on it is also higher. But since we're younger than the rest of the population, we haven't started that.
Exactly.
Once our demographics switch, which may never happen.
Yeah, given the way that
it's likely that we will then take an outsized portion of that pension plan. The real benefit here, I think, comes in two ways. And it's one, the Fraser Institute has suggested it could be as low our contribution rate. So right now, you pay up to $61,500 or roughly in that range. 9.9% of that amount goes towards CPP. The Fraser Institute has effectively suggested that Albertans, in order to meet its withdrawal requirements, would only need to contribute 5.85%, which would be a significant reduction and would then put more money in our pockets, which on its face is attractive, right? Mm-hmm. Yep. But in my opinion, I think it's short-sighted. And also, as somebody who wholeheartedly believes in diversification of assets and the fact that people don't view the dangers of 50 years down the road. We underestimate what can happen in 10 years, but overestimate what we can get in a year. It's a reason why we make poor decisions a lot of the time, and we don't view how incredible our impacts can be over long periods of time. Mm-hmm. We could hypothetically in Alberta start to underperform the rest of the country.
Yep.
And then we would then be in a reverse predicament.
Yep.
So as a Canadian, do you not just want to have that as being a diversified factor, be fine with carrying the lion's share of contributions on a per capita basis?
Be proud of it.
Be proud of it. I don't view it as being like, don't tell the rest of the country that you're doing it. Make sure they know it. Make sure they are thankful.
Yeah.
But at the same time, take pride in it. Take care of your fellow countrymen. And you know what? I'm of the opinion this also has to come from the other end of the country as well. They need 100%. To recognize that we do a lot of great things for them. Perhaps they shouldn't be making it so difficult for us to contribute so much. Maybe we need to work together. But that's a whole other story for another day.
It gets into the...
But I don't think we should be pushing for this because of the managing of the assets. I think it's been it's seen incredible performance. CPP is lauded across the entire globe. We have one of the greatest managed pensions in the world, and we should be proud of that. AIMCO, again, one of the greatest managed pensions in the world. Neither one of them do I think would do a poor job moving forward. However, it's not going to lower the cost of it.
Yeah.
I don't believe that over 100 years, my children will be born in Alberta. They'll likely have kids in Alberta. I think that for their best interest, it's best to have it managed countrywide and continue to, so long as we all have the same passport, we should all have the same pension. And I believe it lowers our risks as Albertans.
Yeah, I think the article goes on to summarize kind of obviously his conclusion from this and summary, and I think I largely agree with it, but I think it boils down to the decision, if it were to be made, would be kind of a short-term or short-sighted type
short-term benefit right out the gate.
I see it 100%. For sure, and I can get on board with that, with that line of thinking. But the unknowns in the future are too much of a risk. You're hedging a huge bet against this, and it's difficult from the numbers standpoint to truly understand what that future risk could be, and then not to mention just the kind of socioeconomic risk with it as well. And do we really want to continue to distance ourselves? I think some people in this province would say yes. I think we've seen the support for distancing ourselves from the rest of the country. But again, I think it is not in the best interests of the country and the province as a whole on a long-term basis. But yeah, I would suggest definitely, if you, obviously Globe and Mail has a paywall, I think they might let you read 5 a month or whatever, but this was a good article and it laid out a lot of great facts and information behind the talking points that aren't necessarily discussed in depth in in the 5-minute news story. So
and Trevor Toom owns his content, so you can actually go to his website and read the stuff that he contributes to.
Perfect.
Yeah, and usually he makes a shortened thread on Twitter or X or however. Anyway, moving on. Mm-hmm. I think we it's great.
It's a big news story this last week, and I think it's just,
it'll be interesting to see where it goes.
Like anything else, make sure that you're doing a few minutes more of a read on these things to make sure you understand the whole story.
So let's finish quickly with the Powerball winner. Ooh. He's been making news recently.
Yes.
So
what was it? That's grand total.
I think $2.04 billion he won. Mm-hmm. And for those that don't play the Powerball in America, which I am one of them, I had to research the difference between the lump sum versus annuity for their lottery winnings. Mm-hmm. So I think he took the lump sum.
How old is he?
He's in his, I believe, late 20s, early 30s.
Okay, and because I was, not to cut you off, but so on the annuity play, if you were to pass away, how does it, do you get your money still?
Good question.
Yeah, okay.
So this annuity pays out for 29 years. Okay, and for this guy, he would have then took an annuity of $206.9 million over 29 years.
Yeah. And to be clear, too, in the States, all that's taxable.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's not going to get paid $206 million per year over 29 years. That's wrong. The difference being that somebody who won the Powerball could have either taken $122 million in a lump sum, or over 29 years, the $206.9 million divided by 29.
Okay.
And then, but the tax impact is effectively equal because the max rate you hit every year
sorry. I mean, given everything,
there's no laddering of tax rates forward. When you're earning we'll call it $100 million a year, right? Like it barely ladders up. So I would take it as a lump sum as well, and then invest it and assume that you're 10%. I give it to CPP, let them compound it at 10%.
Yeah.
But what was most interesting is that this guy, when you give people money, they do weird things, and he's bought 3 mega mansions in California. He just recently bought one in Beverly Hills to a total of $47 million. Imagine the property taxes on that thing.
No.
Could you? So he's spent, of his $700+ million that he received after taxes in lump sum, he's spent $120 odd million or $100 million on real estate. That's not a good idea. I do this for a living. These clients would be tough to deal with. Imagine like a capital call, because he didn't mortgage this thing. I'm going to need $47 million wired to me. I just bought a house.
3.
You know what would be even worse, though? Being his neighbor. You are Leonardo DiCaprio, or you're like Taylor Swift, you own this house for like $80 million. And, this house next to me just went up for sale for $47 million. This young person's buying it. Who is it? Powerball guy. You're trying to be like a super broker in Beverly Hills, and you get the Powerball guy next to you.
That would be a tough sell on a go-forward basis with your community. But,
Gwyneth Paltrow is going to be pissed if the Powerball guy moves in.
If you're going to buy 3 properties, too, like, why all in the same state?
You know what? I don't know for sure that he did that. I know the first one was and the third one was. I don't know if the second one was. But even then, it all makes no sense to me. 3 super mansions is not something that I would do, but I'm going to pose this to you. What would you do if you were gifted or you won $700+ million US dollars and you then had to spend it? Or at least manage it?
Yeah, managing it, I mean,
that's tough.
I might go back to kind of in a sense, like you talk about like your current earnings and like the 50-30-20 rule or whatever. So
would you move from Alberta?
No, I'd always keep my home base here. I think it's easy for people to say that though when you have roots down somewhere, like and you have family and stuff like that. Like I think it's key to be around that if that's important to you. So I think that would always be the case. Would I be buying vacation properties or properties that are in places that mean something to me? Like, yes, I would, but I wouldn't be buying mega mansions. I would be buying something that's, again, me. I would be kind of maybe more so practical about that and say, I'd love to have a place here, like where my dad grew up. I'd love to have a place in maybe like Hawaii or something like that I love to go to and I've been to a bunch of times. I'm like, yes, I could see myself spending a bunch of time here.
Some land.
No, see, that's the thing is like I feel like when you obtain that amount of money, then it's really important, obviously, from a mindset standpoint, to realize like, number one, I lucked into this, and number two, I shouldn't change everything about my life because of it. I feel like that's obviously the age-old story about Powerball winners, lottery winners in general. So obviously, I don't know, like what would I do? I would take most of it and I would invest it, and then I would buy a couple properties that I really, really would want to have in terms of actually going to, and then maybe use them as rental properties, obviously, in the 6 months that I'm spending here with my family. Would I keep working? I think I would. I think that you need purpose still, and
thank God it's still
going towards something.
This is great.
But the other thing too, like honestly, is like I've always thought about this. Like, there's a couple things in my head that I've always wanted to go back to school to do, and learn more about, whether that be actually in like the traditional university sense or just be able to commit more time to it. And I feel like obviously, what money can give you in terms of material things is good, but then like time, right? And that would be kind of the coolest thing, would be able to have the ability to have that freedom of that's everyone's working towards, right? Is having more free time to do things that you actually want to do. So, boring answer for sure, but 3 properties potentially all in California that are all mega mansions, not top of my list.
Yeah, fair enough.
So on the Taylor Swift front, I mean, I feel like we're kind of turning into a Taylor Swift podcast, but she created waves. Obviously, all the Swifties are now NFL fans because she's dating
See how many
Travis Kelce.
Followers he added on.
Yeah, so I just say Pomp had a tweet and kind of summarized. So he played on Sunday, obviously. Taylor Swift was there. He had 7 catches for 69 yards, #nice, and a TD. Gained 300,000 plus social media followers in 24 hours. Plus 400% increase in merchandise sales for his jerseys and related things. And it is now a top 5 selling jersey in the NFL. All within 24 hours.
All
of
because
being on there.
He's dating Taylor Swift.
And I would say mostly because of, so shout out to our friend Jared, who's a despicable Bears fan. And if it wasn't for the Bears being so brutal and Kansas City blowing them out 41-0, they wouldn't have been showing Taylor Swift on the broadcast every 3 seconds because there would have actually been a football game to watch. But unfortunately, that's not the case. So Travis also has the
only thing that
Bears
supersedes the NFL in America is the probably Taylor Swift. Maybe.
Apparently, there was a story. I'm not sure if you saw it either. I who knows if this is true or not, but I saw multiple tweets about it. So in KC, obviously that's not a big market. Their stadium is not like state of the art per se in terms of probably like kind of security and whatnot, or how it's set up. So like she was in a box, obviously, with like Kelce's box, his family, everything like that in there. But I think it's like if you're leaving that, like you have to kind of go through general to a degree. Like there's not like a direct access to like the
There's
basement.
not an elevator up to there.
And if there is, like there's still a portion of it that you have to go through. So apparently they had to like sneak her out in like a popcorn machine.
You're
like
kidding
to get her
me.
down. Yeah. There was a few stories about that, and like they had to be very creative in terms of getting her out of there, because obviously, I mean, as soon as her, like she can't, even if she wanted to show up incognito, like put her hair in a bun and
Sunglasses
and a
COVID
bucket
mask.
hat kind of thing, she's still going to get found out, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's impossible to go anywhere. So as soon as her face was shown, it's like, I mean, how many Swifties were at the KC game? Don't know. But
Probably
enough to probably make a ruckus. Anyways, there was probably people waiting outside, like probably drove 3 hours to sit outside to get a glimpse of her, right? So it's just this. We talked about the phenomenon of her and her, recent everything in terms of her tour and just her being the media darling right now, like the queen of pop. Like, I mean, this is just the instance again of from an athlete standpoint, you kind of had, Michael Jordan, who reached that kind of level of fame. You had obviously like Michael Jackson, the Beatles. Like this is like legit on that level in terms of,
I think it's the biggest ever.
Like it's just of the craziness, right? So
she's bigger than the Beatles. She's bigger than Elvis.
So
it's
Drake,
insane.
But it is true. I mean, yeah, it's very hard for me to conceptualize. I'd like to think that I don't hold anybody in that regard, like other than like like I don't act that way about anything.
Yeah.
That excited about anything, to see someone, to be around someone, to be in someone's presence that much.
Is there anyone
I respect it.
Is there
but
anyone? Anybody?
No, I don't think so. You and me were 25 feet away from Drake, and we loved him, and we didn't act like that.
I know. What about Barack Obama?
No. Like
The Rock.
No. See, like, I just don't, like, what's the point of acting like, I mean, internally, maybe if you can feel that way, but, like, the way that
Donald Trump.
the hysteria around the fandom with some of these folks, and, like, literally people's lives dedicated to following their every move and everything like that. It just feels like, I mean, I can love and respect someone and love their art and love their material or love their sport and respect the hell out of them, but I think it's just a waste of time.
Is there anyone you would force selfie with if given the opportunity?
Like, couldn't deny getting one?
You'd have to go and get one.
I don't know. Not off the top of my head. I feel like, yeah, like, you know what? If I was like going into an elevator and like one of my favorite art, like if Drake was in there, or like if Ice was in an elevator with Taylor Swift or something, like someone like that popular, like, yeah, like I would be like, would you mind? I wouldn't be crying and begging kind of thing, but I'd be like, would you mind if I took a picture with you? And like that's probably regular for them anyways. So I guess like, yes, I would do that, but it's just like, again, I have a hard time conceptualizing their fame. It really doesn't make any sense to me in terms of the hysteria around following them.
I think
and
I would
loving
only
them.
do it with a less famous person, because that would be the only thing.
Because you'd be like, this guy's gonna be famous in 5 years.
No,
so I would be
no,
super
no.
trendy.
Although if you did go back, my opinion of Taylor Swift was she was going to blow up. But no, I'm kidding. Moving on, I have one prediction to finish this thing out.
Okay.
Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift are going to get married.
Perfect. I hope
And there will be no song about any breakup.
there'll be no breakup song.
No. It's just nice to see that America is healing. Prom king, prom queen. It's perfect. It's the only thing that could make it better is if Travis Kelce was a quarterback. Unfortunately, he's just the greatest tight end to ever live. So,
Yeah.
Cam, you got any recommendations?
No, I'll take your counterpoint. We'll write that on the board, and we'll listen to the breakup song in 9 months. How about that?
Sounds good.
Talk to you next week.